In an age of endless superhero sequels, where DC continues to try and squeeze the last few drops of life out of Superman and Batman and neglecting all other heroes who might be deserving of a franchise, Marvel goes ahead and takes a character that very few people cared about, that's already been ruined by Hollywood once, and goes ahead and makes lemons into gold. Let's talk about Netflix's Daredevil.
Pen Made Mightier without bullets.
Alright, so let's talk about Daredevil a little bit. If you're not familiar with it, then why are you still watching this? Go to your Netflix, watch you some Daredevil. I know you're thinking, I don't know if I really care about this guy. He's like a lawyer and he like hits people with a stick or whatever. Yeah, I know. Watch it. It's good. In April of 2015, Netflix released Daredevil. Hard-hitting, gritty drama centered around Hell's Kitchen's favorite devil. It kind of hit everybody by surprise because I don't think many people were expecting to fall in love with Daredevil quite the way that this show made us. But it proved that what Hollywood has destroyed, Netflix and Marvel Cinematic Team can set right. Daredevil is a story about Matthew Murdock, a man who was rendered blind as a child and left orphaned after his father died at the hands of some unscrupulous mobster types after refusing to fix a boxing match. By day, Matt Murdock is a hero, serving justice in the courtroom and making sure that the weak are defended. And by night, Matt Murdock is a hero in a black mask, dispensing justice and making sure the weak are properly defended. Daredevil takes place in Hell's Kitchen, a fictionalized version of the Manhattan ghetto known as Hell's Kitchen. And just like in the real New York, man, crime abounds. And it's presided over by a few different distinct mafia families who are super-headed by a man known as Wilson Fisk, better known in comics as the Kingpin, also known as the big fat bourgeois guy who's got all the plans and ends up fighting Spider-Man a lot more than I think I'd normally expected as a child. Either way, the villain has never really caught my eye. He's just a big dude in a white suit who punches things and tries to rake in the cash. Pretty boring. But Hell's Kitchen is also home to Luke Cage, The Guardian, Immortal Iron Fist, and Jessica Jones, some of which are getting shows on Netflix very soon. I, for one, am really looking forward to this month's release of Jessica Jones. If you haven't looked into it yet, go check it out. But we're here to talk about Daredevil. I'm sure she'll get her own episode in a few weeks. Throughout the first season of Daredevil, Matt Murdock struggles with his new identity as the Devil of Hell's Kitchen, seeking to right the wrongs of the criminal syndicates while still keeping his cover hidden. He struggles with a lot of relationships, including that with his best friend, a few romantic entanglements, and more than anything, that classic story of the scrappy underdog taking on powers far larger than himself. We've got ninjas, we've got fine art, we've got amazing choreography and fight scenes, we've got some really deep characters with a lot of heart. Honestly, I could sing the praises of Daredevil just for hours, but there's one thing beyond all of that that I really think deserves a little bit of a closer look, and that is Wilson Fisk. Because this time, Wilson Fisk is the most interesting character in the entire work. I never thought I'd say that. As I've said before, Wilson Fisk is normally just depicted as a big, fat, roly-toly guy who's a schemer and a bourgeoisie socialite who can hardly be taken seriously. He's little more than a caricature of all the things we look down on the rich and famous for being. And while he's normally depicted as super intelligent, they end up flattening that down to a one-dimensional, mustache-twirling bad guy who seeks little more than financial gain and his own lavish greed. But Netflix bucked all the tropes. I've really got to thank the creative team behind that, because I don't know if I could have taken another bad version of the Kingpin. But what makes this version of Wilson Fisk so good, even though he's bad? Enjoyable. Maybe that's the best word. I think that's because they took the time to make Wilson Fisk not a one-dimensional mustache-twirling dude who has tied a damsel to the train tracks, but rather a multifaceted, interesting, and relatable character on fronts like his love of the arts. One of the first times you see Wilson Fisk, he's examining a painting and really relishing in it. and twirling his fingers over a set of cufflinks in a way that lets you know that those cufflinks are more than simple jewelry affixed to his sleeves. No, from the beginning, this Netflix series shows Wilson Fisk as introspective, troubled, artistic, loving, kind in some capacities, but also still evil. He's an imperfect character riddled with self-doubt, but he's also pragmatic. And there's no fat jokes to be seen. In fact, they show him eating more healthy than I think anybody I know. And beyond that, his objectives make sense. And even if he's still wrong, and you still definitely gotta disagree with him, you can understand where he's coming from. And you might even start to see things his way. Wilson Fisk's objective in all of the first season of Daredevil is to clean up his city. Granted, he's sort of performing a lumpectomy, savagely destroying what he sees as the cancerous cells instead of rehabilitating or trying to weed out the crime through more neutral means. Instead, he blows up a few city blocks and has some people gunned down, but he regulates the crime and he seeks to slowly eradicate it by shrinking it down to manageable chunks. It's a lot more realistic than a dude donning a Ninja Turtles outfit and jumping from rooftop to rooftop. By the end of it, I couldn't help but think that Wilson Fisk might have the right of it. I mean, sure, he was extreme and he went too far, but can you honestly say that some dude in a bandana hitting people in the face with his cane is somehow more sane than the guy who seeks to regulate the terrible atrocities of men through diplomatic and financially solvent means? No. They showed this Wilson Fisk falling in love, stumbling over his tongue as he seeks to impress the girl that he's fallen for, looking deep inside himself and hating what he sees because he's troubled and riddled with insecurities from his childhood. They show that he's a tragic figure, a product of his environment that thrives in spite of his own failures. They show that people love him, that people respect him, and that despite his brutality, his anger, and his rage, Wilson Fisk is still a man worth following. They show that he has a devilish charisma, one that even I couldn't ignore the allure of. I guess my point is, this Wilson Fisk doesn't do evil for evil's sake. I think that this show exemplifies my personal mantra as a writer that nobody does evil for evil's sake. Except for, I guess, cultists and demons. And, who knows, depending on the story you're writing, maybe not even then. It's that kind of care and dedication in writing a character and crafting a person for your story that makes a character truly stand out. Think about Michael Rosenbaum in Smallville. Smallville was not perfect. Definitely a product of the early thousands, full of problems and tropes and annoying references to Superman. Like the time that they put Superman-themed armor in an ancient history display in Smallville High. Yeah, we get it. Clark is Superman. We get it. But when you look at Michael Rosenbaum, I see a version of Lex Luthor that none of the movies ever gave me. Not before, and not since. This Lex Luthor was charismatic, and he was compassionate, he was understanding, and he was treated poorly by people around him for things that he didn't do, for things his father did. And because of their constant bickering and their constant diminishment of his character, he became something that he was not. This version of Lex Luthor was intriguing, and I honestly wanted people to just stop picking on him. I feel like that version of Lex Luthor could have accomplished anything. And I think it's that relatable character that made me really fall in love with him. I wish that they would just get rid of Facebook Lex Luthor and just bring back Michael Rosenbaum. What is that guy even doing now? Moving on. So, imagine if other villains from comic books got this level of attention to detail. If they took them out of their one-dimensional pop-up standee and gave them facets and feelings and depth. What about, Killer Croc? Killer Croc. He's the big, leathery suitcase-looking dude who runs around in swamps and hits Batman, and he's their version of the Hulk because they're too lazy to do anything else with it. As a kid, he had a skin condition. He grew up in a circus and then started committing crimes. Killer Croc, ladies and gentlemen. But what if, as a kid, he was picked on? As a child, he was bullied, and so he ran away to the circus because he thought that that's where the freaks went to be accepted. But there, the freaks picked on him most of all, seeing him as the bottom rung. Not only is he the new guy, but he's also a kid who kind of looks like a nightmare. It would become a veritable hell for Killer Croc. And that would be the basis of many of his actions. Eventually, this Killer Croc could start lashing out if he saw people being bullied, maybe eventually committing a crime on accident that caused him to have to flee his home in the circus and feel like he didn't have any place he belonged. Maybe after that, he would take up Robin Hood-style tactics, attacking only those who had bullied and abused those weaker than them, or those who were different, instead trying to make things equal. And then, when society and the Batman kept turning on him, maybe then and only then did he turn to a higher breed of crime. At the very least, it's way more interesting than like we saw in Arkham Asylum. Oh, God, why? And just so I don't pick on DC too much, why don't we look at, like, Kraven the Hunter? Kraven the Hunter has had some cool iterations. Let that be said. But not every Kraven the Hunter is created equal. Kraven the Hunter, at his worst, is a dude who shows up in a bunch of animal fur on the ultimate hunt, trying to stab down Peter Parker because he's an interesting bit of prey. It's lackluster. It's boring. It's villain of the week at its absolute worst. But what if he was terminal? What if he was dying? What if a man with a death wish went out into the savannah hoping that he would be torn apart by wild wolves? What if when they attacked him, he grew afraid and he fought with every last fiber of his being and killed those wolves with his bare hands? What if the town, who had been ravaged by these wolves, thanked him for his endeavors, praised him, maybe even made him a local hero? What if he found new purpose in that? This Kraven the Hunter could go from place to place, finding whatever menacing monster was troubling them and act kind of as a Crocodile Dundee, taking things down, usually for the benefit of those around him and possibly a bit for his own vainglory, because no human is perfect. Maybe he could start trying to hunt down metahumans as a way to help science help people evolve, and then eventually do it because of a bit of selfish pride or arrogance or maybe even some money. What if when he fights Peter Parker and gets beaten, it is his pride, his ego, that gets most damaged, and after that, the hunt is on? Because nothing eludes Kraven the Hunter, because this is the one thing he still feels pride in himself over. It may not be a perfect version of Kraven, but it's way more interesting than the blasé, run-of-the-mill, goatee-having son of a gun that we usually get in the comics. And I don't know, maybe I'm just a sucker for a character that has more than one facet or more than one way to turn them in the light. Whatever the case may be, I'm really glad that Netflix allowed Wilson Fisk to have some oomph in the new Daredevil series. I hope he keeps having it. I hope the characters are as well developed in Jessica Jones and Iron Fist and all of the blockbuster films that are coming out soon. If you like deep characters, if you just want to see Daredevil in a way that doesn't suck, check out Netflix's Daredevil. We'll be back in a few weeks to talk about Jessica Jones. So, until then, thanks for sticking with us on Pen Made Mightier. If you enjoyed the episode, share it around. And we'll hope to see you next week. Thanks. Bye now.
Pen made mightier without roids.